everyone. Welcome. Gonna give just a couple moments here for some folks to join. So if you are just joining live or if you're watching the replay, I'll invite you to just join me in a deep breath here as we arrive. Okay? So if you'd like to just get comfortable in your seat, and you could join me in taking a deep breath in through your nose, letting your belly really expand. And then exhaling through the mouth. Beautiful. If you are joining, you can join us for just a couple deep breaths as we arrive here together, breathing in through the nose. And then exhaling through the mouth. Amazing. Whenever I start trainings or any workshops, group containers, it's always nice to just allow an opportunity to breathe and connect to your body and allow us all to just kind of get on, the same frequency, the same page. Even though we can't see one another necessarily, we can still kind of feel the energy in the group. And so it looks like we're ready to begin here. So I'll go ahead and get started. Hi. If we haven't met before, my name is Ashley Perl. I'm a somatic healing coach and a breathwork facilitator. I work with highly sensitive individuals in overcoming anxiety and reclaiming authenticity so that people can experience more joy, more peace, more fulfillment, and connection in their lives and in their relationships. And the work that I do really pulls from a wide toolkit of various modalities and practices, but one that continues to be an anchor in the work that I do with folks, not only with myself, with my clients as well, is called internal family systems therapy, or otherwise known as parts work. And this was developed by someone named Dr. Richard Schwartz. He is incredible, and I highly recommend researching him, researching his work. I am a forever student of it, so I continue to learn about it every day. But today I really want to share with you about the work through the lens of how it can really help improve relationships. And I'm not just talking about, let's say marriage relationships, though it absolutely can be with like a spouse, partner, husband, wife, whomever. But it could also be a relationship with a parent or a sibling or a boss or a child or a friend, okay? This is work that can be applicable to anything, all right? And so let's start with, first what this therapeutic model actually is, okay? How it kind of works. And it is rather complex. It's taken me a very long time to understand it on a deeper and deeper level. And so as you're listening to me tonight, just know that this stuff's going to land at different times, okay? And it's okay if you don't get it all today. This is just the introduction. And so we're going to go over that, and then we're going to go over how this can be applied in your relationships. So internal family systems therapy is a therapeutic approach that essentially considers the fact that we all have within us a true, authentic, core sense of ourselves. And alongside that, we essentially develop different parts of ourselves that are created over time, often during childhood. And these parts of us have different sub-personalities. They're different sub-personalities that have different thoughts, feelings, emotions about the world, okay? And they play different roles within our lives, all right? And often these parts of ourselves are created in response to a lived experience in a time where we needed to essentially create a sense of like protection or safety. And this is all happening subconsciously, you guys. But these parts of ourselves are often created as a way to prevent us from feeling or protect us from feeling pain or discomfort in some way, shape, or form. Okay? So just stick with me here. Now, this can, yes, happen as a result of trauma. People are always curious about this. Like, is it trauma? Is it not? Was this a part that was created because of it? Let's not worry about that word right now. I don't want you to get hung up on that. But yes, these parts can be created as a result of traumatic experiences when we are young. And that is why they are so embedded within our systems and within our psyches. And that's why they can essentially run the show and run on autopilot for most of our lives. And it's these parts of ourselves that are often the things that like pull us away from what we most desire in our lives. Meaning it can be a part of ourself that really keeps us from being present, that really keeps us from feeling connected to our partners, that really keeps us from feeling confident. Maybe we second guess and self-doubt all the time. There's a part of you that's likely creating that pattern, okay? And why does this happen? Why does this happen? Well, as young ones, if we essentially have needs that aren't met by our caregivers, which even if we have the best, right, whatever that even means, the best caregivers, parents in the world, it's likely that they weren't able to necessarily meet all of our needs all the time. And so in order to get those needs met, our systems, our body, our brain subconsciously create these patterns, these parts of ourselves in order to get those needs met. But what ends up happening is that we oftentimes try to get these needs met in ways that are not supportive to us as we get into adulthood. Okay, and I'll kind of circle back on what that means. But all we have to know right now is that these parts of ourselves can often keep us from the thing that we want the most, or the things that we want the most. Okay, so you might have a part of you that's really anxious, that's really needing validation all the time, to be reminded, that you are loved, okay, or that your partner loves you, right? Your husband, wife loves you. Now, that like anxiousness, that neediness might actually push away the very thing that you want if your partner, the other person in this scenario, maybe has their own vulnerable parts that are playing it, and they're actually feeling a lot of pressure so that they end up, maybe avoiding altogether. Okay, that this is just one example, but we'll kind of get into how these dynamics start to play off of each other. But all to say that these parts might actually push away the very thing that you want, okay? You might have a part that's avoidant, that was developed to kind of protect you and keep you safe in some way, but as a result, it keeps you from like connection and getting to know people, something that you really want. And so it's like these parts operate in extremes, and once we begin to understand them, we can kind of get to know like what's really happening here, okay? But something to know. There's common parts that can, run a lot of our lives, but your parts are going to be unique to you. Okay, so it's never going to be like one size fits all. Your parts likely are connected to certain feelings and emotions in your body. Your parts are likely tied together with memories that you might not even consciously remember right now. But in your body, they're there, and they're almost like frozen in time, creating this pattern just to protect you from maybe getting to that like really vulnerable part in your life, okay? And that's why it can be helpful to work with someone to help you kind of get to the deeper layers, the subconscious layers of what is happening and why these patterns are continuing to play out in your adulthood. So in parts work, I'll call it that, right? Parts work, we're kind of working with these parts of you. The work is to really map out all the parts that exist within you, get curious about them, explore them, understand them, so that you can heal them, so that you can really figure out like, oh, this isn't true me that's showing up here. This is just a part of me. And the reason why this can be such a liberating approach is because oftentimes the things like our parts, we shame them, or we blame them, or we don't want to look at them. We want to run away from them or hide them. They're uncomfortable. And anytime we shame or blame or hide from or want to hide a part of us, it just gets stronger. It just comes back in fuller force. It like embeds more deeper into our bodies, into our subconscious. And so in doing this work, we can bring them to the surface and actually begin to heal and shift the way they're showing up in our lives, okay? All the parts of you essentially block your true self from showing up in the world. And that is what we're going to kind of get into next here. What do I mean by this true self part of you? Well, you've probably heard me talk about authenticity. You've probably heard me talk about, the true core of you if you've listened to my other trainings. And this all ties into that. We're all born with this true, authentic self. Now, some of you might know exactly what I mean when I say that, and some of you might be really confused, and that's okay. Meet yourself where you're at. I've worked with people who felt like they didn't have an authentic self, and I've worked with people who maybe once felt like they knew who they were, but just these patterns have kind of taken over them, and they don't even recognize themselves anymore in the way that they show up in the world and in their relationships and their marriages. Meet yourself where you're at, okay? When we're connected to the true self part of us, this is where we have access to what Richard Schwartz calls the 8 C's, like the letter C, or maybe the letter C. It's where we feel connected. It's where we feel creative, curious, compassionate, clear, clarity, calm, courageous, okay? And we also feel 5 P's, present, playful, persistent, patient. We have perspective, okay? And so you can start to get a sense of when you're connected to your true self or when you're actually connected to a part of you that maybe isn't your true self, but a protective part that was created. And this is kind of where the fun work begins. I will tell you that anytime I begin working with someone and we start talking about their goals, what are you actually looking for? It usually ties into this authenticity or the true self version of them in some way, shape, or form. They don't know it, but that's what they're really wanting because there's an inner drive and desire that drives us to be in this place where we're feeling connected, where we're feeling really calm, where we can be patient and kind and loving and not acting from some of these patterns that maybe aren't as, loving or maybe more reactive, whatever it is, okay? So there's the IFS overview, okay? IFS, Internal Family Systems. Now, how the heck does that help us improve our relationships? Well, let's start by inviting in just some relationships that perhaps you want to improve in your life. So just think of one right now. Is there, something, a relationship that comes to mind that you'd like to see improved? And how would you like to see it improve? Is there maybe an opportunity to create more communication with, in your marriage or in your family, with a parent, sibling, child, boss? Just take a few seconds to kind of bring one to mind. Okay. And now, consider what patterns you see showing up in this relationship. So are there repeated patterns or storylines that continue to play ongoing between you and this other person? And please be gentle with yourselves as we're exploring this, because all humans have reasons for doing what we do, even if we're not logically aware of it. And we get to have awareness around these things. It could be uncomfortable to look at, but I promise all of you is welcome here. There's nothing I haven't heard before, and I just invite you to be compassionate, okay? So as you're thinking about these scenarios, these storylines that keep repeating over and over again in these relationships, invite in now what part of you might be showing up in this situation. Is it a part of you that gets really defensive? Or a part of you that gets really angry and reactive or very dramatic? Is there a part of you that wants to fight or maybe avoid? You shut down, you get really quiet, or maybe you just kind of people please, overgive, get resentful. What part of you might be showing up in this scenario? And rather than see these parts of you as you, okay, it's this is Ashley showing up in these ways, I'm going to invite you to start using the language that it's not you. It's actually just a part of you. Because this language can create a little bit of separation, and we can begin to put it on this little plate here and look at it, okay? As opposed to really feeling merged or identified with it. So what part of you is showing up in this scenario, okay? And we can also acknowledge that just as you have parts of you that are showing up in these scenarios, It's likely because these parts of you were created as a direct result of something from when you were younger. You don't have to know what that is right now, but you can at least know, trust, and feel a curiosity or a compassion towards this part of you that was created for some reason, and be thankful that you're looking at it, that you're taking the time to really consider like how you can maybe shift this pattern if it isn't serving you anymore. Maybe it served you when you were young, but it's not serving you in your relationship or your marriage or with your boss at work, okay? Just as you have this, imagine that the other person in the scenario also has parts of themselves that are showing up in this relationship with you. And why this is helpful to understand is because as you continue to get to know yourself and your parts and understand how much like curiosity and compassion and understanding is really necessary to understand this, you'll start to feel the same towards the other person, or at least have a little bit of like spaciousness to understand that they have other parts at play too that are showing up here, okay? Now, we get to really look at how much of our own suffering or discomfort or like these rifts in the relationships, how much is it being created unintentionally from wounded parts of ourselves, from these younger, vulnerable parts of ourselves. And as a result, what impact is this having on relationships? But what do we have control over? That's like the key here. What do you have control over? Because this work really requires us to take radical personal responsibility, an ultimate level of responsibility over ourselves, our parts, our actions and things, whether or not the other person actually does. Okay? I hope that makes sense. So improving relationships, you might think, well, both people need to be there and we have to both sit down and improve the relationship. Perhaps eventually. And in marriages, I would say absolutely. Both people like really need to show up. Like that can really, really help rifts in the relationship. But you can improve your relationships by by the other person not even knowing that you're improving it. Okay? And I've seen it happen time and time again. And it happens through you getting to explore, understand, and heal the parts within you that are contributing to whatever is happening in the relationships themselves, okay? So why is there an opportunity to heal relationships through this work, through parts work? Well, when we show up from our wounded parts, it's not really it's not like a clean and pure scenario, okay? Because our parts actually are frozen in time with the consciousness, with the thoughts about the world, the belief systems that we held when the part was first created. That might sound very confusing, and it was very confusing for me when I first learned it. It took me a long time to understand it. But imagine this, okay? Imagine if when you were a young child, every time you would act like yourself, maybe you had a big personality, you would get shamed or yelled at, okay? You would be made to feel like who you were at your core was wrong, okay? Let's say you're 4 or 5 years old. Well, as a result of that, maybe a part of you was created that just kind of shut down, became really small, timid. There was a fear there of being who you truly were, okay? Could you imagine being so young and vulnerable, expecting, maybe mom and dad to just love you for you, but instead you were met with who you are we can't love you if you're going to be like that, okay? You can only be loved if you act like this, okay? Well, fast forward to adulthood, okay? And there's a part of you that really wants to express themselves. There's a part of you that really wants to maybe connect with your partner in your relationship or, with friends, with family, but you are afraid to show your true self because that part of you is still operating from such a place of fear. And anytime that part of you is maybe, what's the word I'm looking for? Anytime there's a threat to that part of you, you might not act like, a 50-year-old adult in this scenario, but rather you go back to that young 4 or 5-year-old, and that's who shows up to a disagreement or an argument or, a little like altercation in relationships. And as I'm saying this, even if you don't relate to this exact example, can you think of a time that you had rifts in relationships where you were like, oh wow, I really don't feel like I showed up as myself. Like, I don't even know why this keeps happening. I don't want to be reactive. I don't want to be so XYZ, but I am. That's how we know that it's not our true self showing up, but it's a part of ourself that is. Okay? And so often our parts are looking to get their needs met. And when I say needs, I mean core human needs: love, acknowledgement, safety, connection. Okay? A lot of the times, whatever we couldn't really get from mom and dad, we created ways to get it. Okay? And it's just a strategy that isn't working in our adulthood. And as we can begin to meet those needs of ourselves, not through the external, because again, we can't expect other people to change and that's how the relationships improve. We're talking about what can we do? How can we clean up our side of the street and make sure that that's at least taken care of? Perhaps after that we can do a connection, right, with the other person if they're open to it, but it doesn't need to be the case. Once we begin to meet our needs internally, right, approve of ourselves no matter what, meet ourselves with love and compassion and create that within us, then we create more spaciousness to see shifts that can happen in the relationships with another, because our wounded parts aren't running the show. We're not trying to get something from the other. And that's the key thing here. Now, what I'm saying might remind you of like the attachment styles, the 5 personality patterns. Absolutely, very much so. It's all related. This model really helps us see how you can begin to map out yourself, your parts, and figure out, what's happening within you so that you can figure out the parts that are related to the attachment style that you have, right? Just to kind of put that connection there. We have to learn and understand and bring awareness to, bring rise to our parts within us so that as they show up in everyday life, we know how to work with them. They don't keep us from the connection. They don't keep us stuck in these cycles where we don't know what's going on. You begin to understand what's going on, and once you can calm those parts of you, bring them back into like create a sense of wholeness within you, as opposed to all these like fragmented parts of you that are just kind of like jumping into the driver's seat, running conversations in your life or running you on autopilot. There begins to be just a sense of more ease in your life and in relationships, a lot more calmness, compassion. We bring in the C's again, right? Compassion, curiosity. You can kind of navigate whatever ends up coming up, and you can start realizing where you were maybe putting pressure on the other person in the scenarios that you've maybe brought forth here today. It doesn't have to be marriage. It could be any relationship where you were putting pressure on someone else subconsciously to meet a need of yours, to fulfill a need of yours, and then reacting when they weren't doing it. So this is all about responsibility and really taking accountability. And what happens is that we get to experience just more like peace and inner fulfillment in our lives when we begin to work with our parts. Okay? So what are some steps that you can take today? Okay, I've shared an overview. There's such depth to this work, and oftentimes it can really be helpful to have someone guiding you to figure out like what parts of you are actually showing up, because here's the thing, we don't just have like one part or one inner child. We have a lot. We have many, and often there's core ones, like a core few that present themselves and show up in different relationships, but they could be presenting in different ways. And so having someone reflect back to you or help you see what those are, help you deal with, the emotions, the sensations, the frozen, pieces of perhaps trauma that exists within your body as we're exploring this, that can be really supportive. But if you're just genuinely curious, you could always, buy some of Richard Schwartz's books or look up some podcasts. He just actually released a new book in May of last year that's all about relationships. I didn't even know this until today, actually. I'm excited to read it, but just do some research. Or you can set up a call with me, and I'm, a clarity call. I'm happy to have a conversation with you, and we can discuss, like, maybe this is the right fit, maybe not. But ultimately, you can just begin to like notice in your life where not you are showing up in these scenarios where you want to shift and change, but just acknowledge that it's just a part of you that's showing up. And can you create some space and compassion for yourself and in these situations? That's the other thing that I wanted to share. And then the last thing is, when we do this work, when we work with parts work, and really I just believe this is like something to help in everyday life for anybody, building conscious connection with our true selves. So what that means, like, you can go back if you're just joining and learn what I mean by this, but in order to show up truly authentically in relationships, we have to really know, like, what is our truth? What is authenticity to us? What are our values? What are our values? What are the boundaries? What are the things we hold sacred to us? And that might help you as you begin to navigate all the other parts of yourself that maybe are coming into play. We are beautiful, amazing, complex human beings with, again, these sub-personalities and parts that have developed within our bodies, within our psyches. As you begin to understand the map that is you, just like you can, more easily get to a destination if you kind of have the map and routes to get there. That's what IFS gives us. That's what parts work gives you, is a map to just understand yourself a little bit more and really help you understand how you're showing up in relationships as well. So I believe that's where I want to stop tonight. I hope that was helpful. Please let me know. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me through Instagram at Ashley Perl. Also on the OKclarity platform. I would love to hear from you and know what you thought of this. And I hope you and your parts, all of you, have a beautiful rest of your day, night, morning, and I hope to see you again soon. My next training will be next month in March, so be on the lookout for that, and I hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.